All right, so at this stage, what we want to do with our Morph mixer is to have it recognize when a user selects an item. Now, the reason we're doing this is because every time a user selects an item, it has to be able to read if there are any morphs in that character. If it's an object with morphs, it has to be able to read and display them here automatically. So in order for that to happen, it has to know when the user selects an item. Now, the problem we have here is that this reacts to any significant event in layout. So if I go to the code here, this function right here runs for anything important. So if we say info hello, something like that, and then we reload it here, so you see hello there, and if I go here and move to another location, it still does the same thing. Now, the problem with this is we don't want our plugin to be processing information every time something happens, because this will slow down layout as a whole. The less processing the computer has to do, the better. So we must put a condition for it to only react when we select an item. So in order to do that, let's go to the ls commander here. Now in here, when I select an item, you will see what commands are actually passed here. So there's select item, of course, when I directly select an item. And then when I use the arrow keys to select an item, these are the commands that come up: previous item, next item, select item, select item. Okay? And also when I hit the objects, edit bonds, lights, and cameras. So all this is part of selecting an item, and these are the commands that correspond to those actions. Now, the problem we have here is that I know this command is select item, however, it's got a number here like 2000. I don't know if this is 2 million or something. Now, this number will change depending on what item has been selected, because this is the ID of an item. So we need to be able to detect when select item is activated without worrying about this number at the end. So in order to do that, if we go back to our text here, you see this value that says command here, this variable here. This variable contains exactly what is here. So to prove that, I can show you by copying that and putting it inside this info, so that we see the command instead of just a message. So if I go back here and add Morph Mixer again, so now we see the actual command that is being passed. So if I select an item here, you see select item with the item ID. Okay, so what can we do about this? Well, we can put an if statement here and say something like if command. Now, I don't want to say if command is equal to select item like this. The problem with this is that the command doesn't come with this text only. It has a number at the end here, which corresponds to the ID of the item being selected. Now, this number changes all the time, so we can't rely on putting a specific number here because we'll miss certain items. So instead, what we're going to do is say if command.contains, like so. Okay. So what we are saying is that if command.contains this word, so as long as select item is in there, whatever we can have an action happen in here, like this. So let it give us the info of the current command that was given. So let's go back here, remove this. I can close this now, go back, open that, and now every time, actually even without opening this will still run. So if I select an item, I'll see select item there. However, if I just move the cursor here, I see nothing. if I select from here, I'll see nothing as well. So we are getting somewhere. If I select an item, I get the pop-up. Okay. However, the problem is sometimes a user will select an object using the arrow keys. So let me do that now. You see that? Let me go up here. Oh, how is that not working? Oh, all right, because these items are in a different. So let me just add 2 no objects here for us to see that. If there's a no object here, and let me add another one over there. So if I use my arrow keys here, I can go between these no objects, and yet my Morph mixer is not recognizing that as a selection. And that's because when moving these, a different command is used. When I use the keys, as we saw last time, that command is, where is that? It's previous item and next item. So let's add that to the selection. So we're going to say if the command that contains that, let me copy that, and then I'm going to say or something like this, or command that contains, what was that again? Previous item, is it? Next item and previous item. So let me go back here and say next. Okay, and then I'm going to say or again, and in this one I'm going to add previous item. Okay, so we've added those as well. So let's see how they respond. So now that I've added it, I expect when I select, I see a notification. Go to this one, notification, and then use my arrow keys now and get a notification as well. Okay, so everything is working except when I select using these right here. Now these, if I go to the command thing here, edit objects, this first one, the objects one is edit objects, there's edit bones, there's edit lights, and so on. So in order to cover all these in one step, if you notice they all have the word edit in them. Okay, so we can use that to our advantage and say or at the end here, we'll say or command contains edit, capital E, like that. So if any of these happens, then do that. Now, or we can change this to double pipes, or you can leave it as it is. That's up to you. The pipe is right beneath your backspace. You have to use the shift key like that. So if you put the double pipes, it's the same as saying or. I like this better because it looks more geekish or something like that. All right, so it looks a little bit more like programming and not English. So you can do that, or you can use the or, it's the same thing. So let's go back and see what we have so far. So now, oh, I didn't need to open that. Now if I use my arrow keys, I get that. If I select, I get that. If I use the objects, I get that as well. So we are good to go. So now every time a user selects an object, our plugin can be informed to check what object it is. Now the last thing we need to do is I want to find out what is the name of the object that has been selected, okay? Because we're going to be using that. So let me say object. I'm going to name it object. You can name it anything you want. So object is equal to, now we're going to use the scene object, which is like this. Scene.first select. So select is capital S, like that. So this right here is how you get the object that was first selected. So we're pushing that into this. However, I don't like using this as usual, so I'm going to copy this to the top here because I want this to be a global variable. Now, global variable just means that variable can be accessed in other functions as well. So I'll put all my global variables at the top here. So I'm going to say scene is equal to that scene. So I'm shifting the burden to that one because that's easier to type. So I'll put that one there. Okay. So object is equal to scene.first select. Now I want it to show me what that object is. So I'll say object.name. So I want to know the name of that object that has been selected when it is selected. So let's go back and try that out. Remove, go back. I don't need to open that. So let me just select an item and I get that's a light and that's a camera. That's no 1 and that's no 2. So let me use my arrow keys as well. I get the same thing. Same thing. If I use edit lights, I get the same thing. Edit cameras, I get the same thing. Now edit bones. So now we have a problem here because it's saying invalid object reference on line 19. So if I go back here and see where 19 is, info, I'm asking it to show me an object that does not exist because in this scene there are no bones. So we have to always account for a possible error. So before we tell we tell it to show us what it has, we have to check if it has anything at all. So what we're going to do is use another if statement. We're going to say if object, like this. So if I just say if object like that, it means I'm asking if the object has a value of any kind. So just by saying if object, I'm asking, does it have a value of any kind? So if it's not an object, if nothing was selected, it won't have a value of any kind. So if this is true, then we can do something like this and have the info in there. So if object is true, do that. Okay. Now the shorthand, there's a shorthand of doing this. Instead of adding all this, what I can simply do is remove these brackets like so, and then put this next to this one, like this. If object, and do that. So now this only works if you have one line that you need to add in the if, because if I add another line like this, then this breaks apart because this is outside the scope of this one. So this is simply a shorthand, but only works with one line. So if you want to put multiple lines in the same if statement, the way I have done inside this if, I've put several lines in here, then I need to add that back like so, and then add those lines in there. Otherwise the computer will get confused. So this is valid like so, as long as it's one line. So whatever I put here is outside this if statement, even if I put it right next to this one. Even if I put it there, it's outside this because there are no brackets. Okay, so that's a short way to simplify your code. So what we're doing here is we're saying if the object has anything, show us. If not, it will do nothing. So let's go back and see if we've fixed that error, and go back and do that. So let me go to select objects. I get the information. Select lights, I get it, but bones, I get nothing, and I also don't get an error. All right, so far so good. We are a step ahead, and we can continue in the next video where we see how to access morphs from a selected object. I'll see you then.